So, dear Minister, dear Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, but first and foremost, friends, it's great to have you here on a very important topic. We will today talk more about the first mover coalition and the importance of that. My name is Martin, and I'm the president and CEO of the Volvo Group. And the Volvo Group, not then to be mixed with our dear siblings on the Volvo car side, we are one of the world leaders when it comes to commercial vehicles, such as trucks, buses, construction equipment. Maybe we have been coming in touch with the Volvo Penta solutions if you're a boater, and are operating in 190 countries. We are a truly global company. We are actually having 2% of our top line in Sweden, where we are headquartered. And we don't have a bad market share in Sweden, but it's just reflecting the size of the country. With almost 50% market share in all our sectors in Sweden, that brings adding up to 2% of the top line. However, we are not here to talk primarily about Volvo today. We are here to talk about how we can actually participate together in decarbonizing different sectors, and not at least a sector that we are very passionate about, obviously, and that is transportation. And I'm very happy also during this Davos World Economic Forum this year that despite all the short-term turmoils and challenges, and not at least now lately also with invasion in Ukraine, but also, of course, with the pandemic and the ripple effects out of that, and that we still also can actually keep a close eye on what we have to do in the mid and long term, really, to deliver for coming generations and to shape the world that we really want to live in. And one of the key factors in this development for me has been actually the Science-Based Target Initiative. I have to admit, when we started to onboard that initiative in Volvo, I did see that more or less as a tick in the box. And why? Because we thought truly that we had plans in the different parts of that decarbonization, and we had to some extent. But the more important with science-based targets is not that. The more important is that you actually are going through not only alone, but together with partners. How do your real footprint look like, as you know? The whole footprint of Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. In our case, north of 90% is Scope 3, both upstream, and we will talk about some examples today, but also then downstream, i.e. our customers utilizing our products. And they are utilized, as you know, for a long time, and they are utilized intensively also. So it's not like cars where they are utilized 2-3% of the available time. They are often utilized 60, 70, 80%, or in certain cases 24/7, as you know. And what is really interesting with the science-based target is that you are creating this dynamic also of what is my Scope 3 is someone else's Scope 1, or Scope 2, or Scope 3 even. And not only directly related to suppliers or supply chain partners, but also customers and customers' customers. I always say a little bit provocative that we as citizens, we want to make the change. But we are, as individuals, not maybe as consistent as we want to be. But that's human, right? But I think also that the corporate sector actually is taking that to their heart because they see the pattern and are supporting us being consistent. And not at least the B2C sector, they are now implementing because they see that this will be a very important competitive advantage if you are supporting us as consumers and citizens to actually decarbonize. And the good news about that, then they are also coming into the science-based targets. And then when they are going through their different CO2 footprints, they are pretty soon coming to, guess what? Transportation and logistics and infrastructure. And guess what? They're also coming to a fundamental conclusion, and that is in the CO2 abatement curve, i.e. how much does it cost to take out different parts of your CO2 curve, that actually transportation is very, very efficient. If you're in retail, 5-6% of your total cost is actually transport and logistics. But just take it, I mean, transport and logistics as combined, then we are a little bit conservative. And that is often representing 40 to 50, or maybe, let's say, 35-40% of the footprint, right? So even if we are actually increasing temporarily the cost by 20%, you can take out, because I've heard many times this week that, yeah, but if everyone is saying that, then it will be very, very expensive for the product. But here it's a unique case. I'm not in marketing and sales, but here's a unique case, because for 20% more per kilometers, i.e. 1% more of the total cost, you can actually take out maybe 35-40%. That's a good equation. In order to do so, we need electrification, we need fuel cell electrification, we need battery electric vehicles. So based on the same electric powertrain platform, you can say modularized. But we also will continue to need internal combustion engine technology based on renewables for certain applications, since we are global, since we are serving all different segments. But not talking about only transportation, downstream, upstream is also important. And for us now, when it comes to the science-based targets, we see the dynamics in all our sectors. It was 115 companies 2016. It was 2,466 per 31st of December. Last year is now north of 3,000. So it's moving fast. And everyone, and the good news is not only that you're adhering to it, that you're doing your inventory, that you're putting your targets. The really good part is that you have to disclose progress. So, I mean, accountability will be much more present than we have seen for other pledges, and that is what I like. A very important move into this journey now is the First Mover Coalition. We heard about it, that the US government, and we have prominent representatives here today, actually together with the World Economic Forum, started to actually make an inventory what companies are interested to be part of this First Mover Coalition that was actually announced and formed in the COP26. And thank you for us to be invited also. As you all know, it's about the hard-to-abate sectors, starting with 4, shipping, aviation, trucking, and steel. And then onboarding, as we speak now, aluminium, and also the carbon removal. And also, I think, is it announced also the remaining 2 or? Yeah. So concrete income is coming up later this year, right? So you can apply for it. For Volvo, we could have been into more, but we have said now to really deliver steel, trucking, and aluminium. But of course, shipping makes a lot of sense also. We are doing a lot of things there as well. Some figures about this. When we started in COP26, 35 companies together with US State Department. And now it's plus 50 companies and $8.5 trillion US dollars representing a market cap. And as we said, a lot of different sectors represented. But I think the strength also here is that it's a governmental representation as well. And now, in addition to the United States government, also India, Japan, Italy, United Kingdom, Norway, and Sweden participating. And we will have also the chance to listen to the perspective from the Minister of Finance here from Sweden. And that is combined and actually covering 40% of global GDP. So that is also very, very massive. So I know that I'm always talking too much, so I will actually try to not do that this time, more than to say that we have 2 exciting panels, time for interaction, Q&As. And we are very proud, actually, to have the opportunity to host all of you. And with that, Maria, you will be our moderator for this session. So please welcome up, and then we get started. Thank you very much, and nice to have you here.
So, thank you. I'm the CEO of the Women Business Coalition, and many of you probably don't know, what the coalition do. But if I tell you that the Women Business Coalition created with 4 partners the SBTI, then you think, wow, okay. And it has been an enormous success. But why has it been a success? Because we have aligned the business community behind that approach. And now we are in a snowball effect because of Scope 3, because of what you just mentioned. You might not know, but we also are a founding partner of the Mission Possible Partnership. That's where the First Mover Coalition was started. And my team, Rasmus, is working with DOE to make sure that what you do with the World Economic Forum, that, by the way, amazing work, it's aligned with the work that we're doing with many of the companies that are part of SBTI, so that then we can scale what you're doing this from the hundreds to the thousands, and in the future to the millions. Okay, so this is the first mover coalition, but this panel is about the fast mover coalitions, because we have 2 sets of panels. So let me invite Mahendra Singhi to come on stage, the Managing Director and CEO of Dalmia Cement. Let me invite also Magnus, Ankarstrand, hope I made it right, the President of Clean Ammonia Yara International, Andra, Fuder, Executive Vice President, Chief Procurement Officer of Volvo Group. So I'll start with you, Mr. Mahendra. We're good friends, because Mahendra has been on this, like Volvo, by the way. I remember in the business summit in India, I remember listening to you and to you. So these things don't start from one day to the other, right? They have been for a while. Can you tell us about your journey and about, and what Dalmia is doing under your leadership, please? And I can sit. Thank you. No, I'm sorry. I didn't invite Varun to come on stage. Apologies, Varun. I can't sit, because this is the Fast Movers Coalition. Okay, no, please go ahead. No. Yeah. Apologies. So Varun, US Department of Energy, together with David, the ones that are pushing the Fast Movers Coalition. Please.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Volvo, and happy evening, friends. I would like to first share that broadly, we always have been first movers, whether in terms of creating philosophy of clean and green is profitable and sustainable, creating a strategy in which involving all stakeholders, as well creating a plan to become net zero carbon cement as well as carbon negative. Just for your information, I may share that we were one of the first manufacturing companies in the world who could declare from COP24 that in 2018, that Dalmia cement would be carbon negative by 2040. And at the same time, it was just not the ambition, but it was with the plan that what would happen in 2020, 23, 25, 28, 30. And we had also identified certain levers that how we would be transforming to renewable energy, fossil fuel, as well as energy efficiency, motor vehicles should be electrified, everything. As well, certain new technologies. Of course, we were not knowing at the time about the green hydrogen, but we knew at the time that we'll be also shifting to carbon capture and utilization. So friends, when we are in 2022, so at that time, we had identified that in 2022, we would be having 492 kg CO2 emission per ton of cement, which is broadly 42% lower than the global average. And when we got the audit done, assessment done, then we found that yes, we are at the same level. We are now 488 kg per ton of cement. And we have the plan that by 2025, what would happen and all this. Now, important here is how we could do it, that yes, we had also involved internal carbon pricing, because there were certain projects which were not viable, but at the same time, if you apply carbon pricing, then maybe you can do a project which has payback of maybe 8 years, 10 years, 12 years also. And it was required, because ultimately we knew that it will be profitable also, it will be sustainable also. And that's also the reason that today we are one of the lowest carbon footprint cement company in the world, and at the same time, one of the profitable company in India. So this is how we could prove the philosophy. Now, to be more specific, what we did is that we committed ourselves for RE100, EP100, then EV100, and these were all initiatives of Women Business Coalition and many organizations. And that has helped us to remain always focused. And that was the reason that, yes, we are feeling that we'll be able to achieve our target. Now, good news is that with the creation of First Mover Coalition, you know, we were First Mover, now we are in First Mover Coalition. and thanks to David, Varun, Senator John Kerry, of course, World Economic Forum and other friends, that first mover coalition has come in a big way. As well, it is also giving us confidence that if we produce green cement, which would also be somewhat more expensive, more costly, then there would be friends in the first mover coalition who would be able to buy that cement. So in that, I also feel that maybe even we can achieve our target maybe before 2040. And one of the major initiatives which we have taken is, one, to work on CCU technology, which has been already studied by Asian Development Bank, and now we are moving ahead in that. We are trying to collaborate with certain financial organizations as well with certain other collaborators who can make use of green carbon so that it becomes part of circular economy. And second one is that transport is also one of the very important elements for us, and to some extent it addresses scope 3. The good part is that in cement sector, scope 3 is only between 10 to 20% in comparison to many sectors where it is 70% to 90%. But still, we have to address it. So in that part, we have committed that to start with, we'll do a pilot project of 200 electric trucks, and then slowly we'll jack it up. And maybe by 2030 or 2035, we have to see now that how things shapes up in India, how infrastructure comes up. But we have already started procuring it, we have started already moving it. And maybe like what I was talking to Mr. Martin of Volvo, that how we can get his trucks, and not only the Volvo trucks, but the Volvo trucks with green steel. Absolutely. So that I can also play the role of first mover, in which I can pay some extra green premium to Mr. Martin Volvo, and then do it.
Absolutely, he's actually prepared.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Mr. Mahendra.
And the last one would be like what I've said, CCU, and in first mover coalition, presently we are working on electric trucks, and there will be many initiatives, because one of the major I would say support to us would be that Government of India, along with other 7 governments, they have now accepted FMC. So we never thought of it, but I think the efforts of Senator Kerry and Varun and David and everyone, I think Indian government has come up. And when it happens, then definitely there would be green procurement policy, there would be persuasion from the government also. And we also know that Government of India is also the co-chair of Lead IT, in which Sweden is also co-chair. So these all efforts sounds great. And when I'm going back from Davos, I'm going back with very good positive thoughts, with very important messages which I can deliver in my country and to my people, that we are on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahendra. So, Mr. Mahendra is a leader in India. But let me tell you, I work at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for many years, and my former boss, Peter Backer, used to say that the accountants will save the world. Well, I think he's wrong. I think the procurement officers will save the world, because they need to make those decisions. So over to you, Andrea. So it is not enough, right, to electrify trucks. What are you going to do with upstream emissions?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say I'm super proud to be in a panel with so much passion for, for this first mover coalition. And Maria, you are absolutely right. Of course, we as Volvo Group, and Martin already was in it, we are fully committed to have a net zero greenhouse gas value chain 2040. And with having science-based targets 2030 in place, it's very transparent and very traceable. But the key question is, of course, how do we do it? And for us, more than 90% of our CO2 footprint is at the end when the product is in the hand of the user. And therefore, we invest heavily, and Lars, our CTO, is very happy about that, in new technologies, battery electrified, fuel cell electrified. But we also believe in the combustion engine, but of course not run by fossil fuel, but by biofuels, by hydrogen, etc. our commitment is as well, when we say whole value chain, of course we have to take upstream our supply network with us. I think it would be quite strange, if I have a concrete example, if we invest heavily in battery electrified trucks and we do not care about the environment footprint of our batteries, for example. So it is without saying that if we want to be ambitious, if we want to walk the talk, we have to take our supply network with us. That's without saying.
And Volvo is quite ambitious. So you're part of the steel commitment, the aluminium commitment, and of course the trucking commitment. And so why is this important to you?
To start with steel. When you take the weight of a classic combustion-driven truck, then actually 70% of the weight is steel and iron casting, being responsible for 60% of the CO2. So that we have started with steel in the partnership with the Swedish steel producer SSAB was very clear. This is our entrance point. And if we don't fix steel, we will never be successful in this journey. The next area to approach is aluminium, like you said, which is now newly set up as a focus area, and that we are committed to transport is also without saying. We are a big buyer of transport, inbound, outbound, and also here, I think we would be not. We could not be taken serious if we would not be the first out to have really the most sustainable transport system, what we are buying. So that's also quite natural. And by the way, there are already now happening great things with decarbonizing specific tracks between our plants. So we are fully on it. But like I said, steel was for us a natural starting point. And also on this note, I don't know if you know what it takes to produce 1 ton of steel or what the emission is. It is around about 1.8 tons of CO2 what is emitted when you produce 1 ton of steel. So definitely a key focus area.
Yes, and I know that Sweden has done enormous progress. We'll talk, I'm sure, about the hybrid project.
Yes.
And I have seen that tone of zero-emission steel, that it's real. So congratulations for that. Now, I hear that there are news coming. So can you advance a little bit about what's next?
I have to fly in to that. We were actually very proud when last October we could show the first fossil-free dumper, the first fossil-free commercial vehicle. And by the way, it was also electrified and autonomous. So bringing all these new technologies together. And I also hope that no one has missed that yesterday we have shown the first truck with fossil-free steel parts. And it is without saying that it will take time to have a full product because we are dependent, of course, of the ramp-up of the fossil-free steel availability. And now it comes. And now I spoil a little bit the next event, which will be 1st of June in Stockholm. Then actually we will hand over the first fossil-free vehicle to a customer, but I cannot spoil what it will be, to whom it will be, so you better stay tuned and watch what's happening 1st of June.
And 1st of June is in 12 days. So we'll put alerts so that we can then amplify through social media, etc. So let me move to, speaking about supply partners, to you, Magnus, and the great work that Yara is doing. And why do you think FMC is important for your company?
Well, first of all, Maria, thanks for inviting me on stage. And thanks for inviting me to talk about the ammonia molecule. I've been enthusiastic about the ammonia molecule for more than 10 years. Not many other people have been. But now we, of course, have our great champion, Andrew Forrest. And I don't think you could be at Davos without hearing him talking about ammonia. So, you know, that's the best advertisement that we can get. But I think what matters to make this work is the value chain and get the whole value chain to work. And in that respect, FMC is extremely important to put the message out there, but also bring companies together with pledges and with sort of value chain promises to start reducing Scope 3 emissions, and by that enabling green ammonia or clean ammonia throughout the value chain. And I think that's been a fantastic. We've seen fantastic results from that over the last year. Ammonia has gone from being almost an unknown commodity to now being the answer to how you ship hydrogen around and how you can make hydrogen available fast.
Thank you. And what can governments do to help you, and what is the biggest hurdle that you have?
Yeah, no, I think again it goes back to the value chain, and I think as great as the FMC and everything that all other associations that work on this are, we have ammonia as our core product. Of course, we have two big reasons we want to make ammonia clean. I think the first reason is, of course, that we want to get rid of our own emissions and make sure that our production system is fit for the future. The second one is that there's a huge market opportunity because ammonia, as many know, used as a fuel, for instance, for shipping, emits no CO2, so you can get CO2-free shipping. And I think we've also come so far. We're now building our first 24-megawatt project, which is small. But we've come so far that we have to start moving away from dinner speeches to signed contracts. And I think that's where we see that, and I'm very happy with Volvo's engagement in this, and it means a lot that although you're not asking for ammonia, but you're requiring green steel, and that has a big ripple effect through the value chain. But I think if you want to get this at scale, we need so much more than that, and there is still a long way from the C-suite to the procurement departments. And I can tell you in person, because we're now in negotiations with a lot of different potential customers in a lot of different industries, who've all voiced significant engagement for clean ammonia, and then when you put a contract in front of them, you get a different story. And it takes 4 to 5 years to develop an ammonia plant. And I think, and that's it's a long, costly journey just to get to the investment decision. And it's incredibly difficult to do that without having any sort of foresight of what the market will look like. There's a lot of numbers out there. There are a lot of promises out there. But to really scale this, and we can do a pilot plant, we can even do a mega scale plant, but we can't do 10 mega scale plants without knowing if we can actually sell our product. I mean, our board, our shareholders are never going to accept that, despite whatever pledges they've made in their associations. So I think essentially what we need governments to do is to have very clear incentives, and by that we mean tax, whether that's tax in terms of a carbon tax, or if it's tax credits in terms of sequestering CO2 as an example. And I think we need both actually to make it happen. That's what we need, because the minute you have that, then the market knows what the price is, what the cost is, and then you can start having commercial negotiations on that basis, on a level playing field. If we sit in a situation where I'm dependent on the support regime in country A and B, C, where I have my plants, my customers are dependent on the support regime in country B, C, D. And it's impossible to get commercial negotiations to work. And I appreciate collaboration, and collaboration is extremely important. But I think if you really think through, if you think that collaboration can solve that without having clear incentives, I think eventually we would have an antitrust problem as well, because we have to negotiate. Eventually, we have to negotiate and get these deals working on commercial terms, and then the governments have to put in measures so that the market can clear this and make this work on its own. And I think a very good example is what we have in the US, for instance, with the 45Q, which is a tax credit to sequester CO2. And you could debate whether that's enough, or if it should be more, should it be 85? I think the whole industry thinks that it should be more. But at least what it gives you is a clear number you can put in your business case. If you fulfill the requirements, you know where you're going to get it for this amount of time, and you have that kind of clarity. And the same thing goes for a carbon tax. If there's a carbon tax, then suddenly you can make assumptions for shipping fuel, for instance. So you can make assumptions on what the oil price is going to be. We've been doing that for the last 50 years. You can add the CO2 tax, and then suddenly you know what kind of willingness to pay will there be out there. And I think that's incredibly important. It will eventually happen anyway. But if we want this to speed up, and there are a lot of things that need to happen in parallel for this to speed up, I think we need that type of clarity. And I think, without speaking too long, the other thing we need, of course, is scale. And for that, we need massive amounts of renewable energy for green hydrogen and ammonia. And we need to start having an honest discussion around CO2 footprint and blue ammonia, because now I think the discussion is very high level, very blue versus green, and nobody actually are discussing, well, what does it actually mean? Because blue ammonia can be a lot of different things. We can do blue ammonia, blue hydrogen today, way above 90% carbon capture, and I think and what we need is then an honest classification and certification of the product that takes into account methane emissions and the whole thing. But we need to get to that level of certification for this to work.
Yeah. So let's move on. And Andrea, I'll come back to you to reflect on FMC. But I want to talk to you, Varun. I'm very good friends of Antonia Gowell, okay? And she called me when she got the call from DOE and says, Maria, I'm going to Washington tomorrow, like a mess with the kids because she wasn't expecting this. Can I call you? Because, we need your help. Anyway, so that was kind of a crazy idea. And I love Antonia. And she went on. And she kind of changed all her family plans to be with you. And my question is, what was and what is your vision of what FMC can do?
Well, first of all, Antonia is incredible. We're so lucky to have her as a partner, as is Nancy at the World Economic Forum. So, Nancy, thank you. David Livingston, who's here, and you're going to hear from him on the second panel, and I have probably pitched hundreds of companies as we've stood this initiative up. But it's a select few that actually answered the call. They are the true first movers, right? I want to recognize the 3 companies we have here. Mahendra Singhi, for example, has already started to purchase electric trucks. Secretary Kerry cited you. Martin, you are exactly the kind of CEO that we hope for. Someone who says, initially I came to this as a box-ticking exercise, and now I realized actually it requires some real action and thinking and sometimes even paying a cost premium early on to really decarbonize your supply chain. Most other CEOs do not think that way. And it's what's required for us to stand up the first movers. And then down the road, everybody else will eventually realize how you have started this trend. So thank you. And thank you also to Yara, who so wonderfully welcomed Secretary Kerry in Norway and brought Norway along as well onto the first movers. So let me just answer your question and share a couple points. Today has been an amazing day. There was a press conference, as you mentioned, Secretary Kerry, Bill Gates, the minister made wonderful remarks. We have more than 10% of the global Fortune 2000 stock market value on the FMC. But David and I immediately said, all right, now we got to make it happen. We and our company partners actually have to get down to work, roll up our sleeves, and really meet these purchasing commitments by 2030. It's easy enough for David and me to say it. It's the companies that will actually meet them. Volvo, you have already started. The world's first fossil-free truck, for example. You have already started by making the offtake agreements from the facilities like hybrid. It will take many more companies going beyond just the commitment to actually turning that into a bankable volume commitment that you can go raise infrastructure financing for and get to a final investment decision, not just on the first pilot fossil-free steel plant, which is hybrid, but the next 100 full-scale fossil-free plants. We'll need 100 of them this decade, by 2030, if we're going to get anywhere near our goals by net zero by 2050. So our first order of business, the vision is actually implementing and getting the companies to meet their purchase obligations by getting these plants built. Second, I really want to double down on your point. Government policy is absolutely critical. And I hope David, who has spoken with dozens of governments over the last several months, will talk more about what our partners are going to do. Just very briefly, you're right. It's incumbent on us to step up and develop policies that are very aligned with the companies meeting their purchasing commitments. And it's also on us as governments to step up and make the procurement decisions in our own countries using our public procurement budgets that align. Thank you. that align with what the companies have stepped up. Because look at the leadership from the companies, more than 50 companies. It's time for us to step up as well. I appreciate that you've cited President Biden's leadership on tax incentives. He has a Buy Clean initiative. But that brings me to my third point, which is the motivation and vision behind the First Movers Coalition was actually a fairly nuanced point that I'm so grateful that Martin and Mahendra and Sveintorre have all understood. It is innovation-focused demand signals, which is different, by the way, from green demand signals. Yes. Green demand signals is a broad set of demand signals that support both existing and new technologies. You can, for example, make a demand signal to reduce your carbon emissions from, let's say, cement or from power by a small percentage. And that will support incremental gains, improvements in efficiency. An innovation-focused demand signal is a subset of broad green demand signals. The innovation-focused demand signal is tuned in such a way that you can only meet it if emerging technologies come to the market. You are forcing technology to get better. And what Martin's doing, for example, by saying 10% of his steel by 2030 is going to come from steel sources, primary steel, that is 0.4 tons of CO2 per ton of steel or better, and it's even lower for recycled steel. By making that commitment, he is forcing new facilities onto the market because no facility in the world except for hybrid can actually meet that. Governments also can do the same thing through innovation-focused public procurement and innovation-focused investments in research and development and demonstration. That's how we have to tune our thinking, to develop the technologies we need for 2050 and get them to the market this decade by 2030. So I'll stop there. You'll hear a lot more on many of the details of the announcements and the first movers from my colleague David, who's just been, my partner in crime, and I'm so happy to do this with him. But I just want to say today's a great day. Thank you to our companies. Let's get to work.
Well done. So with this happy note and looking at timing, let's move to the second panel. Thank you very much to the panelists. And let me welcome Minister Damberg, Minister of Finance from Sweden, and David Livingston, the partner in crime, but also advisor to John Kerry. So, well, let me start with David. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for these companies, right? Because they are the first mover, they are the first movers. There is a price premium. They are asking for some government support. Yeah, can you tell us more and go into the detail on how you think that we can progress so that we move from this group of 50 to the hundreds and to the thousands?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and thanks to Volvo for putting this together, and for the leadership you've shown, along with the other companies that have already been mentioned, Dalmia, Yara, and so many others. As noted, we come today to these announcements at the World Economic Forum annual meeting with 8 new governments alongside the United States that are joining us in this endeavor. From Europe, well represented. We have Norway, Sweden, Italy, Denmark, the UK. From Asia, we have both East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia all covered. Japan, Singapore, India. Between these 8 countries plus the United States, we have 50% of global GDP covered. So now the question is, how are we going to use that leverage? How do we keep this group small enough as a set of forward-leaning governments that it's manageable and that we don't dilute the amount of ambition that we're talking about here today? But how do we also use that leverage to drive change? We're asking governments in the First Movers Coalition to do several different things with us. Number one, to really become active co-owners of this initiative, not just to endorse it, not just to check a box, not just to help the United States out, but to truly have equity, to have a stake in this initiative as we build it out further. Number two, we're asking governments to help to align, where possible, their own investment as governments and their own demand through procurement with the targets that we've set in these different sectors in the First Movers Coalition. That's going to look different for every government. Some governments have, let's say, strategic funds that are investing in at the project level on a discretionary basis, green funds, for example. Others, like the United States, might have at home the DOE Loan Programs Office, which offers loan guarantees to innovative technologies and factories for those innovative technologies within the borders of the United States. So we've partnered already as the US with the DOE Loan Programs Office, where they're going to prioritize projects, loan guarantees to projects in the United States that can help supply these FMC demand signals. We're also using our Development Finance Corporation, the US DFC, what used to be called OPIC, for many of you who will know that, which will do a similar thing with its debt and equity tools in emerging markets outside of US borders. So we're working with those two institutions, and we hope that other governments with similar financial tools will find other ways to try and, again, at the very least, nudge that next marginal investment, the attention that's being paid to investment opportunities at home and abroad towards projects that can help those companies that have made commitments meet those commitments. We're also, again, asking for alignment on government procurement. This takes a while. It's a first step, and I'd actually love to come back to this if you can kind of maybe ask on that a little bit later. But the government procurement piece is a very important one. And then finally, I'll just note, we're also asking countries to help us elevate the role that the first movers can play and the role that these sorts of advanced market commitments can play on the international stage. So I'm pleased to see that the First Movers Coalition, for example, was highlighted in the US-EU Trade and Technology Council joint statement with the ministerial meeting that just occurred outside of Paris a week ago. I think you'll see some exciting things in the G7 Energy and Climate Ministers communique coming out in just a few days' time from Berlin. So keep your eyes tuned on that. And in other initiatives from the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that President Biden just launched in Japan to international initiatives like Mission Innovation and the Clean Energy Ministerial, we're looking forward to working with governments to ensure greater and greater alignment. Again, not just to elevate this initiative, but to make it a powerful force multiplier for all these efforts that are already underway and all the efforts that governments are already engaged in.
I'll come back to the green procurement, but I'm really eager to learn from you, Minister Damberg. How has Sweden supported the green transformation?
First of all, we have ambitions in Sweden. We want to be a leader. We want to be a front runner, moving fast. And we say that we want to be the first fossil-free welfare nation of the world. So achieving this, we have to move fast, and we have to work together with other ones, because we're only 10 million people. We're a small country, so we cannot create markets. We cannot create demand for ourselves. We have to work with others who actually want to run fast forward. So we're actually, when we look at the goals set by ourselves for 2030, we're on track on our 2030 goals. In 2045, we need to do more to get to net zero and then to negative emissions. But we have a strong partnership with public and private partnership, and together with the environmental movement in Sweden. So actually we've had a fossil-free collaboration, actually working together with industries. 22 industries have joined forces, having their own plan to be fossil-free. Transportation, cement, aviation, construction, steel. And this has created a momentum where business themselves take their own decisions, they make their own goals, and put pressure on us. What are the incentives? What are the challenges that lies ahead of us to achieve this? And this has created a drive forward, and also a positive image. It's not industries that say, no, we cannot do this, we cannot do this, we have to do this as well. So this has changed the mentality of Sweden. Fortunate enough, we have a changed image of industry. It was not that long ago, industry was the problem. It was going out. It was not the most important thing. Now industry is at the heart of the change that has to come to meet the goals of climate change. So now industry is actually investing heavily in Sweden. In the northern part of Sweden, 25,000 jobs is expected in industries the next 5 years. And that was only in the northern part of Sweden. It's also in the western part of Sweden. So this is driving change and also creating jobs. So that's also a very important image and message to the world. Doing the green transition create jobs in energy sector, in battery sector, in transportation, in steel. And getting the first pilot plant on green steel without emissions is huge for us, because we're transforming a technology that's been the same for 1,000 years, and now we see it is possible to make steel without emissions. And that, because we had the tremendous success of batteries in Sweden now. We didn't construct batteries in Sweden. Now we construct batteries all over Sweden, because we're doing a transition in the transportation sector that is reliant on batteries. But what point is it to create a green battery to put in a brown car or a brown truck? That's not the point. So if you want to create a battery, you have to fill it with green energy, you have to be recyclable, but you have to create the car sustainable as well. And this creates a momentum in change that is very positive. And of course, what has Sweden done? Are we so much different? I don't know. Of course, we had our CO2 carbon tax in '91. Yes, that was quite early. We have incentives with Industry Leap that we give some money for the industries that take these first steps. We now have a state credit, giving credit, guaranteeing loans for these early investments. So we do a thing or two from the state. We take part of it, but we're not the main driver. We set goals, we have ambitions, and we work together. That's the point, I think.
Thank you. Certainly very impressive. I worked in the Spanish government a long time ago, and certainly the green procurement is sometimes a big challenge when you have tight budgets. So can you tell us both more about what your government is doing in that respect, and whether you are also first movers there?
Well, let me first recognize Sweden's role really as a first mover. I mean, I just want to say that there is so much to learn, I think, from the Swedish experience. And like you said, you may not be the largest market. You may not, be the one that's going to shape, just with your actions alone, the entire market. But you also set an example for others to learn from in Sweden. And you could say from A to Z, you've been a trendsetter. You could say from ABBA to zero emission steel, you've been a trendsetter. Now, in terms of the United States, I think you've seen a real dramatic shift from the past 4 or 5 years to what President Biden is doing today. Varun mentioned the Buy Clean task force that's been set up. This is an interagency task force that's moving as fast as possible to identify what levers we have, what the right targets are, what the right definitions are, to try and start driving sustainability through all sorts of construction products, building on the unique opportunity we have with the bipartisan infrastructure law that moved through with overwhelming support in our Congress, and which will soon be seeing investments flowing. So when we make investments at ports of entry and along Canada or along Mexico, when we're upgrading ports, when we're upgrading grid infrastructure, how can we leverage those investments to ensure that we're starting to use them to not just be investing in sustainable infrastructure in terms of our electric grid that can handle more renewables, electric vehicle charging stations, et cetera, but ensuring that that infrastructure has sustainability embedded within it. We know that the emissions footprint associated with building a piece of infrastructure can sometimes be greater than the emissions associated with operating that piece of infrastructure for 3 decades henceforth. So we have to be mindful from the get-go about how we're doing this. The Buy Clean Task Force is already starting to drive some change through for example, the DOT, Federal Highway Administration, on pavement and pavement requirements. We're doing it through environmental product disclosures and starting to do more to catalyze the use of environmental product disclosures. And we're also doing it through the GSA, which applies now this sort of sustainability requirement to things, to any project that involves more than 1 cargo worth of asphalt or of concrete. So keep an eye on that. We're going to have more to come. But I also want to call upon, if I may, Nancy Gillis, who's not just the lead of the First Movers Coalition here at the World Economic Forum, but also actually has a long history working at the GSA herself and knows a thing or two about what the United States has done and can continue to do to be an innovator in the procurement space. So maybe, Maria, if we could just
Yes, please,
swing
Nancy.
a microphone over to Nancy. I'd love for her to say a few things too.
Thank you very much for the recognition for the fact that procurement is so important. I agree with you that if change is going to happen, it happens in the procurement world. Why? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at your suppliers because you're wanting to take a path. And if we're talking about deep decarbonization, they're going to have to be on that path with you. And so this is what's really exciting. What I love, of course, is you've heard from somebody who's much more in touch with what the US government's doing right now about what the Biden administration is doing. But there's also recognition that governments have been active in sustainable procurement for many years. It's been challenging, but they have. And in particular, there has already been the adoption in many countries in rethinking procurement to performance contracts, those in which you actually set what are you buying in a different way than you have before. You're not just describing the product any longer, you're describing what you want it to do. And think about the power when we start talking about performance contracting, and what we want it to do is we want it to mitigate climate change, and we want it to do it equitably, in a just way. That's what I'm so excited when we talk about the First Movers Coalition, and we talk about, okay, we've got great country, great companies, now great vision, a great to-do list. And it starts with procurement.
Well said. So, Minister, yeah, what you want to add?
First of all, I think you can always do more on procurement. I'm not satisfied because there's so much money into public procurement that is not used to drive change. So I wouldn't say that we're perfect on this, but actually we see that also on the regional level in Sweden that has much of transportation, public transportation, there has been a move for quite a long time to drive change, to have procurement that says exactly what are we buying and how do we achieve it? Can it be done in different ways? We've seen early adopters on electricity, on biofuels, and been driving change, and that has been important for the companies to actually sell products in the first place, and I think that is important. The other part is to real transformative innovation. As you said, how do you ask the question when you do public procurement so you don't just buy a thing, but you actually buy the result? And that we have some example of it, but we don't have enough, I would say, and it's not as easy always to do. So I think we have more to do, but I just must acknowledge what has changed with the US back on stage. As a Biden, Kerry, driving change, wanting to do things, this is instrumental for the cause we're actually fighting. So for us, it's an honor to be part of your mission on transforming and doing the first move. So we want to do more, and just to mention problems for us, we have a green goal in Sweden, named the forests. 70% of Sweden is forests. Not all countries have that. So they don't understand the possibility of actually using the forest as a driver for change. We could use wood instead of oil in everything. It's coal, molecules. The same molecules in trees like in oil. So we can make plastic, we can make chemistry, we can make batteries, we can make everything out of forest. And that's a challenge because all countries don't see forest in the same ways. We understand we need to plant more trees in the world. We don't have a problem. The Swedish forests are growing every year because we have a system for hundreds of years. We will always plant 2 trees when we cut down 1. So we have a growing forest, but we want to use the forest in a transition. We try to do it, we're doing it, but we can do even more. And there we have a fight in the European Union because some countries have forests that they have names on. We have forests everywhere. So this is a challenge for us to make them see that if we want to have the transition really going forward, we also have to use our assets. And in the Nordic part of Europe, we have assets that can be instrumental in this fight if we're allowed to use the green, gold in the forest.
Thank you very much. So, well, thank you. Extremely inspiring, and we need to move. I think we cannot have questions because we need to finish in time, but I'm sure we will continue the discussion after the session. So thank you very much, and let me welcome Martin for some concluding remarks. And before Martin, you say that, because I'm going to hand over and then stop my moderation role. This is the first mover coalition, and it needs to move to be the fast mover coalition, because we need to accelerate, because the clock is ticking, and then we need to mainstream what the leaders are doing. So I think the world is watching you. There was one fact that stayed on my mind, is that with the work that you've done on green steel, on clean steel in Sweden, you have advanced 10 years the decarbonization of steel. So it is true that the small countries can have a huge impact. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for moderating. It has been great. and of course, thanks to all participants. It will not be easy to summarize this, because I think we have a new expression pop up, the power of passion and procurement. Because I felt the two here, and as two of the main messages actually. And I have to say, if I should summarize, I think also some key elements, obviously, that we all believe in, and we have to move both on the internal side, on the corporate sector, but also, of course, on the public sector when it comes to carbon pricing, tax, what is doing harm is pretty easy to do, and we have to come to that. Then we have a lot of challenges. But to utilize the force of the demand side is giving a lot of opportunities for us, and not at least when it comes to innovation. And I have to say, public procurement, super important, but also Mahendra, I promise, we will continue to work on a smart solution together. Actually, I didn't recognize I had a fourth member of the First Mover Coalition in my pocket here, because it's Maersk actually represented with a pen here. So they're also represented. But also, I remember when I started to think about lean, and it has been written tons of books about lean and TPS and the Toyota production system and what made them, successful. But I think most of them missed the point, because it was a lot about the tools. It was about Kanban, it was about, how you should think about the 5S and how you should do a lot of the methodologies and tools, right? But the whole story about actually lean is about three things. It is about flow, it is about pull, and it is about human centricity. And I think that is what the First Mover Coalition is all about, these three things actually. Because it is about flowing this in the value chains, it is about pulling and not pushing, because then we are getting the demand coming, and then we are innovating because we see the demand is coming. And it's about the human centricity that we are working together. And already, for all of you not being part of it, I can tell you, not only on, so to speak, the more big picture, but very tangible discussion also in this group that is fantastic amongst companies, but also amongst companies and governments. And for us, being in transportation, it is so important to also have, as much as we can, a coordinated action to move from a brown to a green platform. And that is not easy. But this is a way of doing it, and one of the ways of doing it, because when it comes to, you can have an electric truck, but if you don't have the charging, if you don't have the green generation of energy, if you don't have the guys ready to produce the material needed, etc., we'll not do it, right? 2040, Andrea was into it, the last deliveries at the latest of fossil-based solutions and products from the Volvo Group. 10 years later, they have lasting at least 10 years in the market, then in order to actually deliver on what we are promising our coming generations. Next week, we will not reveal anything more. Stay tuned. 1st of June, Stockholm plus 50. Secretary Kerry, if we are lucky, might be there also to support us. And now maybe you wonder why I'm standing here only with my shirt and roll up. And I will just end with a quote that I love from one of my predecessors, Gunnar Engelau, who was the CEO of the Volvo Group in the 60s. Last time I used it was actually when we were inaugurating Camp X Innovation Arena in Gothenburg, where we are cooperating with a lot of other corporations, big and small, about innovation. All of you are welcome to join that movement. And I utilized that. He said in the 60s about what Volvo was done, he said, I take off my hat for everything that we have achieved. Now I get a little bit emotional, but I take off my jacket and I roll up my sleeves for everything that we have to do for the future. Thank you very much.